It's crunch time. South Africa, nicknamed the Rainbow Nation, will be holding its 7th general election since the end of apartheid.
South Africans are expected to cast their votes using the national, provincial and regional ballot papers. This will be for the very first time for the country using 3 ballots in an election.
The ruling African National Congress has led South Africa since the nation's first democratic elections, which saw Nelson Mandela become president in 1994. But over the past 3 decades, the ANC has been accused of failing to live up to its promises. So, how does it keep winning election after election if it can't seem to get the work done?
There's a great sense of loyalty to the party. We can take that from other liberation organizations in Africa which have stayed in power for much longer time despite their performance in government. People feel that the party have taken them from oppression to freedom.
South African journalist Kenneth Mokgatlhe will fill us in on the issues top of mind for voters ahead of next week's polls. And
class of 2024, let's go!
She may be months away from casting her first ever ballot in an election, but she's also a certified expert in the field of integrated behavioral health.
Graduating with a doctor of behavioral health, it's our first time ever to see a graduate of that age, so it's a wonderful celebration, and we hope that there are many more.
We'll introduce you to the teenager taking black girl magic to a whole new height this graduation season. This is the A55 podcast. I'm Nia Krofi Smatabe. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the A55 podcast. It's always a pleasure to connect with you. Quickly, I'd like to say hi and thank you to a few of our listeners who've reached out on social media. It was great to hear from you, Caleb Fritz, and thanks Wilhelmina Kufu for your encouraging words. I also want to thank those of you who have given us 5-star ratings on Apple Podcast and Spotify. We truly appreciate it. And I'd love to hear from you too. Follow us on social media and drop us your comments over there on Instagram and X, formerly Twitter. We are at A55Pod, and on Facebook, our page is A55 Podcast. Gertrude Davison Teta is here with our proverb for the week from Kenya.
A bird does not change its feathers because the weather is bad.
Thanks, Gertrude. If you are my age or older, or probably closer to my age, there's a high probability that whenever the name Nelson Mandela is mentioned, one of the first images that comes to mind is that of his release from prison. That photo of him in a suit with a raised fist, walking arm in arm with his wife at the time, Winnie Madikizela Mandela. Or probably bits of his speech in Cape Town to the throng of black South Africans who celebrated his release.
I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony.
I'm sure you probably know the rest of the story by now, but if you don't, here's a short version. After about 27 years in prison for leading a campaign against the apartheid government, Mandela was released in February 1990. Upon his release, he and his party, the African National Congress or ANC, entered into negotiations with the government of F.W. de Klerk to end apartheid. It took a minute for the parties to reach an agreement on the type of government they want. Once that was settled, elections were held in April 1994. The ANC won a 2/3 majority and ended up in a coalition government. In the build-up to the 1994 general elections, the ANC campaigned on a reconstruction and development program agenda that, among others, promised to build houses, introduce universal free education, and extend water and electricity to areas that lacked them. 30 years on, electricity, stable, reliable electricity at that, remains an elusive goal for South Africa, considered one of Africa's advanced economies. The country has since 2007 been dealing with erratic power supply, leading to daily power cuts, or what is known locally as load shedding. Last year, as the situation worsened, the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, declared a state of disaster in a bid to try to fix the problem.
The National Disaster Management Center has consequently classified the energy crisis and its impact as a disaster. We are therefore declaring a national state of disaster to respond to the electricity crisis and its effects.
The declaration meant additional powers and less bureaucracy for the government to resolve the crisis with extra funds. The power crisis has been blamed on alleged corruption and mismanagement at the national power company Eskom, which has an estimated debt of $26 billion as of last year. So, with the energy crisis still looming large, what other issues are top of mind for South African voters as they head to the polls on May 29th? What solutions, if any, have the various political aspirants preferred, and are they viable? And could South Africa be heading into a coalition government again after 3 decades? South African journalist Kenneth Mokgatlhe joins me shortly with some answers. Kenneth, thank you very much for joining us on the A55 podcast today.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. And I'm happy that you join us as well. So before we delve deeper into the issues around the election itself, I know South Africa, you kind of have a slightly different election process for electing your president from the way the rest or most of us in Africa do. Can you walk us through the process? I know the public votes for the parliament, I guess, and then the parliament actually gets to choose who becomes the president.
So the political system in South Africa is such in that the people vote for a political party. Then immediately after the elections, parties are going to get seats according to the votes they obtained. And then they will send their representatives to the parliament. So parliament consists of 400 seats. And then the first meeting will be electing the Speaker of the House. And that meeting will be presided over by the Chief Justice of the country. Then after that, the Chief Justice will make a way for the new Speaker. The new Speaker will then continue with the meeting to elect the new president. And the new president will be elected amongst the occupiers of 400 seats. And then immediately after being elected into becoming the president, they cease to be the member of parliament. And then it is him who is now going to constitute his own cabinet, which starts with his or her deputy. And then afterwards, he elects the ministers in cabinet, which they are going to work in a space of 5 years. So people do not directly elect their own president, but there is an ongoing debate or discussion where people are talking about maybe piloting a new system where they will be able to elect their own president, as we are seeing in other countries.
That's interesting. So I'm just curious, though, what happens to the seat that the person who eventually becomes president occupies? Is there like a by-election immediately to fill that seat, or that becomes vacant for the long haul?
Not at all. So the party where the president came from, it will now send another person who appears on the names of the people who are supposed to be in parliament. They will send the next name of that person to become the new member of parliament. So I must also make a mention that the constitution allows the president also to elect 2 people who are not necessarily members of parliament to become part of his or her cabinet, meaning that the president can go out and elect a private citizen who is not necessarily member of any political party to join the cabinet based on their merit, based on their skills.
No, okay. That's interesting to know. And speaking of someone who is not already a member of parliament, one thing I read is that there's been an expansion to the whole electoral system thing where now independent candidates can actually run to get into parliament instead of being attached to, say, the ANC or the DA or the EFF. Is this new change going to affect the chances of, say, the more established parties?
It's a whole new system, new reform that we are getting used to. So what it generally means is that the private citizen can now enter political contest. Initially, it was only political parties which were allowed to contest for state power. remember, we have two different elections in South Africa. The other election is called local government elections, where population is afforded an opportunity to elect their own ward councillors and mayors, and then which also takes about 5-year term. And then we have general elections, which are going to happen this year, where people elect parties that is going to govern the national government. So it was only parties which were permitted to contest for elections. And now, for the first time since the inception of democracy, we are going to see private citizens contesting for elections. So for this particular elections, we have about 5 independent candidates, but they have not really made serious inroads due to lack of funding, because you really need a serious financial muscle to make your visibility seen and to make your influence felt. So I'm not seeing them making any influence that will be bigger than established parties like the African National Congress, Democratic Alliance, or Economic Freedom Fighters. There are other parties which are going to be contesting the elections for the first time, like Rise Mzansi, there's Action SA of Herman Mashaba, there's Patriotic Alliance, and there are a couple of others which are also showing signs of going to make a serious political inroads. Possibility of them getting representatives or seats in the parliament.
Okay. And now, I know that ANC, they've been in power since apartheid ended about 30 plus years ago. And many South Africans, especially Black South Africans, have had cause to accuse the ANC of failing on its promises from, 20 plus years ago of improving their lives. But then the surprising thing also is, or maybe not surprising, as it happens in politics, they get criticized, but then they also keep getting to form the government. From your interactions with South Africans, why do you think, A, they keep criticizing the government, but then B, they still keep pushing the ANC into the majority to be able to form a government?
So amongst the South Africans, or the voters of the ANC in particular, there's a great sense of loyalty to the party. You can take that from other liberation organizations in Africa, which have stayed in power for much longer time despite their performance in government, because people feel loyal and they are sympathetic due to the historical credentials of what the party have done for them. So it is still the same in South Africa. There's a sense of indebtedness. They are loyal because the party have taken them from oppression to freedom. And they believe that the party can renew itself. They think that there are some small elements which can be fixed within the party. And the other point is that you have got opposition parties which are also disunited, and they have not been able to brand themselves in a way that is different from the ANC. So opposition parties are seen in the same vein as the ANC, or they are being called the ANC light, because they have not come to interpret themselves different from the ANC. For example, they don't define themselves outside the Freedom Charter, which is the guiding document of the ANC. So they are not coming up with anything that is new to the South Africans. So they only lambasting or lashing the ANC on the poor or weak performance since 1994. They blame corruption and they blame all this, but they are not coming up with different policies that is going to deal with the problem of unemployment, poverty, and other social ills that engulfs South Africans at the moment.
As a journalist, you know, covering the election and looking ahead and talking to people, you've been following the debates, the campaigns, public opinion, whatever. I know unemployment is one of the issues that keeps coming up. I know the current energy crisis is also an issue that has dominated the campaign trail. In your conversations with everyday South Africans, what other issues do they say are important to them, and which ones are the politicians addressing?
Yeah, I'll just divide South Africa into two, because South Africa is divided into two nations. You have got the nation that is rich, and then you have got the nation that is poor. So the expectations of these nations are different. So for the poor, which obviously constitute about more than 70% of the population, what they expect from the government is bread and butter issues. They are expecting government to supply them with clean, safe, and affordable water. They are expecting government to create employment, sustainable opportunities to them. And with the other nation, the rich nation, they are expecting government to keep them safe in the communities where they live. They are expecting government to give tax incentives because they are running businesses. So they expect government to create conducive environment for them to continue playing a pivotal role in the economy of the country. So there's apathy, a sense of apathy amongst these people because they feel that their issues are not being attended to. For example, the municipalities throughout the country, there are about 253 local municipalities around the country, are at the edge of collapse. All of them are not playing their constitutional obligations. I'll give you an example. Some 4 weeks ago, you had city of Johannesburg, one of the biggest metropolis in Africa. It was unable to provide water to more than half of its population. And that was a catastrophe because without water, the economy will stand still. There's nothing that is going to happen because government is not intervening effectively to ensure that water does not become a problem. Many communities in South Africa do not have water, so they are given water on a ration basis, meaning that you only get water once in 2 weeks, and the other communities will also get water once in 2 weeks. So that really affects the livelihoods of poor people, and the unemployment keep expanding. Just yesterday, we received the statistics, which does not show to be stopping the skyrocketing numbers of young people who are joining the unemployment rate. And the government seem not to be doing enough to ensure that the numbers are low. I mean, you have more people divesting, that meaning that companies are leaving South Africa. So it means that there's something that the government is not doing right to try and attract foreign direct investment.
But on the issue of youth unemployment, though, is it clear what the factors are that are contributing to the numbers increasing year on year? Because I think at the last check, it was over 30%, right?
Yes. So it was over 30%. So you have about more than 7 million young people who are actively looking for jobs. And then you have about 8 or 7 million who have given up on looking for jobs. So you have about 15 million people who are supposed to be part of the workforce, and they are now out of the workforce. One of the issues that is a factor is the one that I had just mentioned. Government should play a role to ensure that the environment is very conducive, friendly for investors to come in and invest their money. So I'll just give you an example. Today you have got energy crisis in the country. And it's quite obvious that there's no company that would want to come in and invest their money where there's no electricity, because it means that the energy crisis will hamper the progress or the growth that they will want to be making. For example, there's a dairy company, a big dairy company, which used to create 6,000 jobs for the people in the northwest province in South Africa. And the company left because the municipality could not ensure that there was water, there were proper roads, there was no electricity. So the company ended up going to invest in Cape Town. So it means then that now that about 6,000 people lost their jobs, and these jobs are going to be created elsewhere in the Western Cape, in the city of Cape Town. So it's a big problem. There's a lack of political will to ensure that the business do come to invest. And the other one is the tax incentives. The government does not give tax incentives to people who want to come and play a pivotal role in creating jobs. So you end up with many businesses leaving the country to go and invest elsewhere in the continent or elsewhere in the world. And the other thing also is the quality of education. So if you don't have an education system which responds to the economic needs, you are not going to have employable young people. So you have got people who have got like a mismatch of skills, who have got the skill that is not really needed in the labor force. So it means that there's something wrong with the higher education and training institution. That is why you'll have more people coming from other countries, because inside this country, you don't have the people with relevant skills.
So an issue of transferable skills from the classroom to the workforce, that's also an issue. Yeah. And what are the politicians saying about these issues on the campaign trail? Are they proposing any solutions that you know of?
No, I don't think so. So at the moment, I was just looking at the messages of political parties in general. So what you have is just a reaction to the failures of the ANC. All of them are talking about the issue of load shedding. I think you also remember that the land is a very contentious issue in South Africa, because about 70% of the land belongs to the minority white people. So they tend to make it political in a way that every political party now, including Jacob Zuma, the former president, who was the president for about 8 to 9 years, he now talks about the land that when he's given another chance to govern South Africa, he will ensure that he returns back the land to its rightful owners. There's no one who talks out of these three issues because they are contentious. Many people want to be employed. Many people want the end of load shedding, that's power cuts. And then many people do not have access to land. So they need land to allow them to participate in the mainstream economy of the country. So the political parties, they are not coming up or trying to convince the electorate on tangible ways to make that happen. For example, they are not telling us how they are going to create those 2 million jobs. For example, the ANC have been in power since 1994, but they are claiming that they are going to create 2.5 million jobs, when in fact, from COVID, more jobs have been lost and more people are continuing to be retrenched in various sectors of the economy. At the moment, there's a state-owned postal services, South African Post Office, which is in its process to retrench about 6,000 workers as a result of poor policy of the ANC. So how are they going to ensure that they create around 2.5 million in the coming 5 years when they are given another mandate to rule South Africa again? Because they have not been able to do that for the past 30 years, especially under the government of Cyril Ramaphosa, who came in 2017, because he had come in the cart of fighting corruption, which obviously plays a big role in terms of creating those opportunities. You have more companies from outside the country who are afraid to invest their money in South Africa because of the perceptions of corruption and the fact that government is not doing anything in terms of consequence management, in terms of dealing with that corruption. Today, in the cabinet of Ramaphosa, who came in with the fighting corruption cut, he has more people in his cabinet who are implicated in the wrongdoing, the likes of Gwelemantashe, Zizikotwa, and then many other ministers who are implicated in what we call Zondo Commission, a commission that was initiated to deal with issues of state capture or allegations of state capture, where one family called the Gupta family was alleged to have been capturing the South African government during the Zuma years. Today, according to CPI, the levels of corruption have risen more than those years of Jacob Zuma. So it's a serious problem that the new administration, the 7th administration, will have to deal with the issues of corruption in the government.
You have the ANC that has been in power for all this while and made promises that people have accused them of not keeping. And alternatively, you have the Democratic Alliance, or the DA, which considers itself a liberal alternative to the ANC, but most South Africans also accuse them of being too white. You have the Economic Freedom Fighters, founded by Julius Malema, a former ANC youth organizer, whose party is also seen as too rowdy. And then the newest addition is the Umkhonto we Sizwe party, founded by former President Jacob Zuma, who also has his own issues he's dealing with. I mean, really, some have said that this election will be historic and all, but for you, what do you think is at stake in this election for South Africans?
So you have the ANC, which is obviously limping going to these elections. It's quite certain that they are not going to score outright majority like they've been doing from 1994 up until 2002. 2019. So now they have got more challenge coming from obviously this united opposition, because if these opposition parties were able to seize an opportunity and take advantage of the weakness of the ANC, they were going to perform much better. But when you look at the DA, obviously you are expecting a decline or a marginal decline in terms of electoral performance due to the fact that in 2016 and the years after 2016, they had an exodus, high number of black representatives like Musi Maimane, who used to be the leader of the DA, the former mayor of City of Johannesburg, Mr. Herman Mashaba, who has now formed Action SA, which is obviously going to take from the trough, it is going to take from the well of the DA, and not only Action SA, but we also have another black liberal party now called Rise Mzansi, which is obviously going to take the votes of the black middle class, who are hoping that these liberal parties will represent their policies. And then you have got the EFF, which is doing quite well. We've been noticing such improvements in the by-elections in the municipalities. They are growing, and unlike other parties, unlike the DA, the Umkhonto Wesizwe party, they are like the ANC. They have been able to set their foot to establish the national footprint everywhere in the country. And they have even shown with the launch of their manifesto, where they went to KwaZulu-Natal, the second biggest province in South Africa after Gauteng, big in terms of its GDP, big in terms of its population. So they have went there and they have really filled the stadium, something that was difficult for the ANC to do, which simply states that people have lost some confidence in the ANC. But this election is not as historic or momentous as it is being described by the media. I don't think they will in any way change the situation for the better for the ordinary South Africans. What I suspect will happen is that the ANC will be in coalition with other parties. For now, we are asking ourselves, are they going to be in that coalition arrangement with the DA or with the EFF? And many people feel that it will be too good to be in coalition with the Democratic Alliance, while many are saying, no, it will be much better with the EFF and the Umkhonto Wesizwe party. So you must also remember that these characters are not new in the EFF, as we have just alluded, that many of them are from the ANC, and they were also labeled to be corrupt during their times in the ANC. Mr. Julius Malema was implicated in a lot of corruption in the government in Limpopo. He was accused of having collapsed one of the provinces, Limpopo province government. His deputy, Floyd Shivambu, is implicated in the collapse of the VPS Bank, one of the mutual banks which was started by black old people in Limpopo as an initiative which helps them to build houses. You have MKP, Umkhonto Wesizwe party, led by the former president, who is also a controversial man. So he's not clean as he would want people to believe. So these are not new people. They are all coming from the ANC. So they want to see the collapse of the ANC. So people don't really trust them. So that is why they don't want the ANC to be in coalition with them, because they believe that the state coffers will be empty before people know it. So that's why they feel more comfortable with the DA due to the track record of the DA, where they have been governing in the municipalities, where it shows that they are performing much better than the municipalities that are led by the ANC. So I don't think these elections will bring much needed or much desired outcomes. Looking at the needs of the people, people need to see their lives improving. They need to see employment opportunities. They need to see the gates of higher education and training institutions being open wide, because at the moment you have more people who are not being catered for by the state to go to universities.
But I bet you, Kenneth, if the outcome is that the ANC has to be in coalition with either the DA or the EFF, then of course this election has been historic, right? At the end of the day, if that's what happens. So well, we'll keep an eye out and see how that ends.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope South Africa will have very successful elections that will not be met by any violence or any possibility of violence, like they have always experienced very non-violent elections since 1994.
Absolutely. We hope so, and wish you all South Africans the very best as you head to the polls. Kenneth Mokgatlhe, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Nia.
Oh, and just by way of an update, South Africa's Constitutional Court has barred the former President Jacob Zuma from running for parliament in next week's election. The court ruled that the former president's 15-month sentence in 2021 for contempt of court disqualifies him from contesting in the election. They cited the country's constitution, which prohibits anyone given a prison sentence of 12 months or longer from holding a seat in parliament. We'll keep an eye on the elections in South Africa and we'll update you in the next episode of the podcast, which I should say will be focusing on democracy in Africa. Now, it's graduation season and social media is awash with photos of graduates posing in their academic gowns. But one teenager has achieved a feat many can only dream about. Before You Go is next. And before you go, do you remember what you were doing when you were 10 years old? I honestly don't remember a lot from my childhood, but I'm certain at age 10, I was in elementary school and was up to mischief whenever possible. How about you? Before you embark on that journey down memory lane, let me tell you, whatever you were doing at age 10 pales in comparison to what Dorothy Jean Tillman II was doing. At age 10, the Chicago native was taking her first college classes.
I started when I was young, first getting my associate's degree in psychology, going on 11, and then since some of my credit hours for that were able to go towards my bachelor's, I got that at 13. And then I was able to get my master's by 15 years old, and then that led to me getting my doctorate degree at 17.
Last December, she successfully defended her dissertation, paving the way for her graduation from the Arizona State University with a PhD in integrated behavioral health with a concentration in management, a course defined on the university's website as providing training on effective management of integrated care systems. So, why was Dr. Tillman interested in this course? Here's what she told Chicago's WGN Morning News.
Well, I got my DBH, so it's a doctorate of behavioral health and integrated behavioral health on the management concentration. And so that's making sure that health facilities are as integrated as possible so that our mental health professionals and our physical primary care providers are in the same facilities working together for the best care possible provided for humans. And I just feel like that's such an important topic that young kids need to be educated on, that as I've gotten my degree, I've started to think of ways that I can integrate it with the work that I already do with youth.
Now that she's done with her PhD, Dr. Tillman is working to expand her summer STEAM camp. Get it? Not just science, technology, engineering, and math as we know it, but hers includes art as well. We say hearty congratulations to Dr. Jean Tillman II. Wait, when you add the doctor though, do you still have to add the second? I think with the PhD now awarded, she becomes the first of her name, right? Unless, of course, the original Dorothy Jean Tillman also has a PhD or MD, in which case, forgive my overexcitement. At this point, I feel like I need to listen to my producer and enroll in a PhD program as well. She's almost halfway through hers though, and Dr. Tillman is done with hers, so wait, I'll be doing that all by myself? That's our show for today. Many thanks to Kenneth Mokgatlhe for walking us through the upcoming elections in South Africa. A special thanks to my producer Gertrude Davison-Tete and Bright Dra, our social media coordinator. I'm Nia Grofi Smatabe. Don't forget to join us again for our special episode on democracy in Africa. Have a good weekend and talk soon.